Hi there and welcome to another Papetti Math YouTube video tutorial where I'm going to be teaching you Algebra 1. And in this video, we're going to look at exercise number 5, where we're going to be using the elimination method to solve a whole bunch of different exercises that are all a little bit different. So let's get started where it says, remember, right here, remember from exercise number 1, when an equation is multiplied by a constant, the resulting equation will always remain true. So this is something new that we're going to bring into this exercise, where we're going to be multiplying an equation, perhaps both equations, by a number in order to eliminate one of the variables. So let's get started in part A. And if we're looking at part A, again, we can only add these equations together once we have opposite coefficients. So let's take a look and see if we have opposite coefficients. Now we have 3 and we have 4. Those are not opposite numbers. We have 6 and we have -3, and those are not opposite coefficients. So now what we're going to have to do, and this is a new step, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to look and see if we have maybe one number that's a multiple of the other number. For example, we have 3 and we have 6. So can we multiply this -3 by something in order to get a -6, which would be the opposite of +6? And the answer is yes. We can multiply this bottom equation by 2. By multiplying this bottom equation by 2, we will have -6y, which is the opposite of +6y. So let's go ahead and distribute this 2. And as we saw in exercise number 1 in this lesson, when we multiply an equation by a constant, the result is an equal equation. So we're going to multiply 2 times 4x, and we'll get 8x. 2 times -3y is -6y. And 2 times 10 will give us 20. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to recopy the equation I have not used yet. And in this case, that's going to be 3x plus 6y is equal to 24. Now that I have both of my equations and I see my opposite coefficients, now is when I can add these two equations together. And when I add these equations together, I'm going to have 11x. The 6y's will cancel out, and that will be equal to 44. So now that I have 11x is equal to 44, this is a lot easier to solve than these two equations up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide each side by 11, and I'll get an x value of 4. But remember, I'm not done until I have an x and a y value. So now I could choose either one of these equations to substitute my x value into. So I'm going to choose the top equation that says 3x, but in this case, the x is going to be 4, plus 6y is equal to 24, which will give me 12 plus 6y equals 24. And then I will subtract 12 from both sides in order to be left with 6y is equal to 12, which means one more step, and that's divide by 6, and I'll get y is equal to 2. Now that I have an x value and a y value, I have a solution to this system of equations, which is 4, 2, because my x value is 4 and my y value is 2. Going on to part B, I want to do that same thing. I want to look at my coefficients and see if I have opposite coefficients. I have -7 and 5. Those are not opposites. And I have 2 and -8. Those are not opposites. But now I want to look at those coefficients and see if one is a multiple of the other. And yes, the 2 can be multiplied to get to 8. And how do you multiply 2 to get to 8? And that's by multiplying by 4. Now, before we go ahead and multiply it, let's just check to make sure that it will result in opposites. 4 times +2 is +8y. 4 times +2y is +8y, which is the opposite of -8y. So we would be safe by multiplying by 4. So 4 times -7 is going to give us -7x is going to give us -28x. 4 times 2y is going to give us 8y. And 4 times 54 is going to give us 216. I'm going to recopy the equation I have not used yet. And that's 5x minus 8y is equal to -32. And now I'm going to add these two equations or combine these two equations together. I'm going to have negative 28x plus 5y, and that's going to give me negative 23x. The 8y's are going to cancel out. And now I'll have 216 minus 32, which will give me 184. My last step is going to divide that by negative 23. And that will give me an x value of negative 8. And remember, we got our x value, but we're still not done because now we want to get the y value. So I'm going to be using this top equation now, I think, to substitute in my x value. So I'll use negative 7x, but instead of x, I'll substitute in a negative 8 plus 2y is equal to 54. Negative 7 times negative 8 is going to give me positive 56 plus 2y, and that's equal to 54. I'm going to subtract 56 from both sides in order to isolate y, and I'll be left with 2y is equal to negative 2. Finally, we divide both sides by 2, and I'll be left with y is equal to negative 1. Now that I have an x value and a y value, I can go ahead and write my solution as a coordinate point, where x is negative 8 and y is negative 1. So there's your solution, negative 8, comma, negative 1. Now we go to part C. And in part C, we have 9x and 3x. Those do not have opposite coefficients. And we have negative 4y and negative 4y. Those do not have opposite coefficients. So now you want to choose one of these equations, and you want to see what you can multiply one of the coefficients by to get the opposite of the other. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to multiply this bottom equation by what? Now, if you said negative 3, you're correct. And if you said negative 1, you are also correct. Because whether I multiply by negative 3, which will cancel out my x variables, or my negative 1, which will make this a positive 4y and cancel out my y variables, either way is a good start. It doesn't matter whether you solve for your x or your y variable first, as long as you solve for both of them by the end of your problem. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply by negative 3. Negative 3 times 3x will give me negative 9x. Negative 3 times negative 4 will give me positive 12y. And negative 3 times 28, well, what's that? That's going to be negative 84. And I'm going to recopy the equation I have not used yet, which is 9x minus 4y is equal to 52. And now, since I have opposite coefficients, I'm ready to add these equations together. So the x variables are going to cancel out because they have opposites. 9 minus 9 gives you 0. 12y minus 4y is 8y, and negative 84 plus 52 will give me negative 32. Now, finally, I want to divide by 8, and that will give me a y value of negative 4. Now that I have my y value, I want to go back and substitute it into either equation. And the equation I'm going to choose is that bottom equation, 3x minus 4y, but instead of y, I'm going to put in a negative 4, is equal to 28. 3x, negative 4 times negative 4 gives me positive 16 is equal to 28. And I'm going to subtract 16 on both sides of the equation, and I will have 3x is equal to 12. My last step is going to be divide by 3 on both sides of my equation, and I will arrive at an x value of 4. Now that will give me an x value of 4 and a y value of negative 4, which is my solution for negative 4. And now finally, on this last part of this exercise, we have part D, where we have 2 and 3, which are not opposite coefficients. And then in the front of the y variables, we have 3 and 2, which again are not opposites. So in this case, we want to multiply not one, but we're going to want to multiply both equations by a constant to eliminate the x or the y variables. So what's the number you can multiply both 2 and 3 by, and perhaps find their least common multiple? And that number up top would be 3, because 3 times 2 would be 6. And that means on the bottom we'd have to multiply by -2, because -2 times +3 would give us -6x. So now if I went ahead and I distributed the 3 to the top equation, I'd get 3 times 2x is 6x, 3 times 3y is 9y, and 3 times 6 is 18. On this bottom equation here, I have -2, and I'm going to distribute the -2 to the 3x, and I'll get -6x. And if you notice, there you have your opposite coefficients. Those will eventually cancel out, but I need to make sure I distribute to everything else first. -2 times 2y is -4y, and -2 times 4 would be -8. Now, since I have my opposite coefficients, I'm ready to combine my equations, and that will eliminate the x variables. I will have 9y minus 4y, which is 5y, and 18 minus 8, which will give me 10. So now that I have 5y is equal to 10, I can just divide each side by 5, and I'll be left with y is equal to 2. And now I could choose either equation to substitute that 2 back in for to obtain my x value. And I'll choose the top equation, 2x plus 3 times y, but in this case, y is going to be 2, is equal to 6. This is going to give me 2x plus 6 is equal to 6, and I'll have to subtract 6 to get all my constants to one side. This will give me 2x is equal to 6 minus 6 is 0, and my final step there would be to divide both sides by 2, which will give me an x value of 0. Finally, I'm going to write this as a coordinate point because I know my x value is 0 and my y value is 2. So here we have looked at 4 different exercises where in one of them we had to multiply both equations by a constant. In one of them we had to multiply one of the equations by a negative number, and in the other two we had to multiply one equation by a positive number. So we've looked at a variety of different exercises in exercise number 5 right here. And if this video is helpful, please give it a thumbs up. And you are now ready to go on to lesson number 4 in chapter 4. Thank you for watching.